Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Crafting these ordinances, and so this gives us the leeway to repeal the funding because the bonds have not been sold yet. We also, there's another ordinance too, which we'll address after we talk about this one. Do you have anything to add, Councilor Starr?
Well, I think Councilor Stehly's right. I think we've seen some new information that's come to light with the investigation of the asbestos concerns, as well as the settlement agreement that DE&R and the state departments have put out, and feel that it's time to revisit the thing. The one thing that we have 4 guarantors of the contract, and as part of the settlement agreement, obviously they admitted no fault and wrongdoing when you look at the copy, but at the same time didn't have the resources to pay a $20,000 fine, and at the same time have the resources to guarantee a $30 million building. I am not naive enough to think that there aren't different companies and different corporations and different groups that are involved. But the bottom line is we got a personal guarantee from 2 of the 4 individuals that are addressed in this settlement, as well as illegally disposing of asbestos is alleged in the notification of violations that again, the department sent out. So in light of this new information, in first reading, we'll have the opportunity to ask those questions, review the process, and we're not slowing anything down because the bonds aren't planned to be sold until approximately April 1st as well. So we'll be able to revisit this, as well as I've had many constituents ask how we could be doing business with a company that can't afford to pay a $20,000 fine or doesn't have the financial resources to do that. And that's in the statement in writing. So.
And once again, we are not opposed to development downtown, nor are we opposed to having ample, affordable parking options for our citizens. But this project is full of questions, and it serves our citizens well to slow this thing down, get the answers we need, let's clear the air, and we can revisit this down the road in a few months. As I said before, there's nothing pressing that says this has to happen right now.
Part 2?
Well, I think right now we'll take some questions if you have questions about this ordinance.
Is there anything the city administration could say or provide to you that would change your mind on this?
Well, I think for me, the one thing that this is also involved in the RFP process, or the RFQ or request for qualifications, and I know we've kept all that financial information as private as possible as part of the requirements of the RFQ. So I think it'd be really difficult at this point to point that out, but I'd sure be interested in knowing the difference between how you can't afford a $20,000 fine, but you can personally guarantee a $30 million project.
Well, and I think and this is scheduled to go, Councilor Starr and I have, this is on the docket now for January 2nd. And it's a good discussion to have in our community. And the city attorney's office can come forward and reassure the citizenry about what will happen if this partnership is jeopardized by any lawsuits, any criminal charges. This is a unique experience where we're partnering with a private company. $21 million of our citizens' money is going to the parking ramp. They're putting in $30 million for this development, which will include their hotel. We're going to be connected together. We have an obligation on the city council to vet this out and make sure the process is as pure as possible. And I've heard from constituents, and I know Councilor Starr has, that there's great concerns in our community. So once again, let us not be known as a community that just gets an idea and heads into it despite what any peril may be. We always need to be cautious and vetting things out for the sake of our citizens. Any other? Yes.
There's an agreement that's been posted online publicly for over a month, and both of you read that full agreement between Legacy Developments and the city of Sioux Falls.
You mean you're talking about the contract?
The lease agreement.
I have looked. Yes, I have
looked. Have you read the entire thing? Do you feel that you could answer questions on it if we had them?
At this point, I probably wouldn't want to answer any questions on that. And this isn't what this is about.
ask.
And Matt Nelson, Matt Nelson and Derek Ketchum, our city employees are here. Matt Nelson has been a huge proponent of this from the day one. I'm working with city council members to push this project through, and Derek Ketchum as well. They've been proponents of this partnership. And I've asked repeatedly, since this was unveiled in April, to know who the investors are going to be. Our citizens want to know who we're doing business with. And they refused to do that. Legacy Development could have revealed that. Instead, they gave us the names of 4 individuals. And 2 of those individuals we have questions about. So we still have time to put the brakes on this thing and to revisit it.
Some
Yes.
of your,
I do apologize, I'm not a member of the press or anything, but just as a citizen of Sioux Falls, I love The Sopranos, and there was an episode where they were dumping asbestos illegally. And so it sounds like the mob to me when asbestos is being dumped illegally. And I'm just curious, is there a cost to recover the asbestos and basically do it the right way? Will $20,000 basically cover the cost of maybe digging up asbestos that was illegally dumped? Or am I getting things wrong?
No, I think, I sure wouldn't make a mob connection. I think that's a little
Well, I
out
just,
there, but I'm going by the email that we received yesterday afternoon from Diane Best, who's the city attorney that works with the Public Works Department, and in her statement basically said that there was someone from the landfill that was contacted by DNR, and that the city is, let me find that exactly in the quote, where the debris was deposited in the landfill, and after receiving communications from DENR, landfill employees identified the specific area where the asbestos was deposited, and they are monitoring the site and maintaining records as requested by the State Department. Beyond that, the DENR did not indicate when or to what extent it will review or investigate Holtgren's actions. And it basically goes on to say that the city is monitoring where it was deposited in the regular construction rubble versus where an asbestos type material would be placed in there. So we are, as a city, continuing to monitor that waste that was incorrectly placed in the landfill.
some of your colleagues on the council have said that they were assured in private conversations by the city staff that no matter what eventualities there are from the building collapse, park grant project would be used for any of that. My question is, have you been given that assurance behind closed doors at all leading up to the December 5th vote? And since that vote and our Argus leader stories have come to light in the last week or two, have you asked that question again and have you received an answer?
I personally was never told.
I've never asked for a private meeting. All the questions that I've had on this have been done in public. We did meet with the developer in private, several counselors. I did, I think Councilor Stehly was at that meeting, and another counselor was there, and we went through the project when it was still a 4 or 5 level story development, and we had the chance to, and that's the only closed doors meetings that I've had. Everything else has been publicly addressed at a council meeting or an information.
And I have had discussions with the city attorney as I was crafting these ordinances. And there are questions, there are issues that need to be addressed. The problem that's happened is that we're having conversations behind closed doors with our city attorneys, and people are getting different pieces of information, and I'm saying, we need to be having these conversations in public. We need our city attorney to be out there answering this so that the information will be scrutinized by other city attorneys and other attorneys across the state. And once again, I said this last night at our golf course meeting, I'm going to say it now. We need, on the city council, we need to have our own attorney. Because right now, we're being represented by a set of attorneys that are taking their direction from the mayor. And we all know in lawsuits and in court cases, there's 2 ways of looking at an issue. And I think we need some fresh water coming into Sioux Falls when it comes to legal advice. The city council has budgeted money for a separate legal counsel. And I think in this issue, we will be needing to have people weighing in on this.
So if the city attorneys or somebody on city staff can go on record in a public setting and explain why the parking ramp project is immune from building collapse fallout, would you pull these efforts back?
It would be something that I'd be willing to listen to.
And that's, hopefully that'll come up at the first reading.
Why not sooner?
I think this needs to go to, well, we're committed, it's on the docket for the first reading, so. Because even before this happened, I'm on record saying I was opposed to this project. We got the second penny tied as collateral. That means that if for some reason the parking lots themselves can't support this 21 million investment, we're gonna cash in on the second penny. People don't like that. We have the problem with who the investors are actually going to be. We also have an issue that it's $21 million for 520 spots, of which only 390 are new. So we both were saying that that's a very expensive parking lot. So I've been talking to people, I've heard from people who say, yeah, we need parking, let's reassess this and have more parking downtown, make it something that's going to be reasonable and solve our problem. But anyway, the whole thing to me needs to be readdressed.
So is your repeal effort because you don't like the project or because of the federal investigation?
The federal, well, do you want to?
I'll jump in, I'll take that first. I think for me, that rather than taking a second bite, we have discussions all the time on the council where there are winners and losers, and we argue our point and we move forward when we don't necessarily agree or disagree. I've won fights, I've lost conversations and votes, and this is strictly for me sponsoring and co-sponsoring this is because of the new information that's come out and to take a look at it. This wasn't something that we had to consider and to take a look at prior to voting on this project. I'm not ready to relitigate the number of parking spots. I lost that argument, and I'm was willing to move forward with the project and be a supporter of it because we do need more parking in downtown Sioux Falls. I don't think anyone came forward and said that we don't need more parking. It's how we do it, how we get to it, and for now, for me, the repeal is based solely on the investors and the development group that is coming forward. So it's the additional information that we've received sent passing this originally.
The additional information specifically, again, is?
The specific information is what was released from the Argus leaders investigating and the report charges that came from the Department of Energy and Natural Resources, the South Dakota Department of Energy and Natural Resources.
On the manner in which asbestos was dumped.
And the financial capabilities of the investors.
Not all investigations lead to charges.
No.
If the investigation's closed without charges, then would you be supportive of moving ahead with the partnership?
Well, I think there's a settlement agreement that was part of the discussion, so I think that will be, for me, that's the main point that I'm making is bringing this repeal.
Since this information has been released, have either of you been in contact with the DENR or OSHA?
I have not.
No, I haven't either.
I've received copies of both the notice of violations that was put out, and I have a copy of the settlement agreement between the state and Mr. Drake and Mr. Holker.
And once again, Councilor Starr and I are going to differ on this, but I've sent out a letter to people who had contacted me, pro and con on this ramp. I've been sending it out to them saying, I will be keeping a close watch on what we're doing here. Reassuring citizens that just because this got passed doesn't mean we're not going to be overseeing what's happening. So in light of what happened last week, in addition to my other concerns, I think it's prudent to go forward with this repeal. And again, if it's all, the air gets cleared and everything is everybody's on the up and up, then we can move forward with it later. But, and actually the city, unfortunately, has spent over $700,000 in preliminary schematic design and legal fees before this even came to the council. There was a lot of money spent, which is another issue I have a problem with, putting the cart before the horse when the mayor's administration does all this promo stuff and we haven't approved it yet. So $700,000 has been spent, probably more, right, Mr. Ketchum? Could be more?
Well, if you remember, the funding was amended in the budget process and by Councilor Starr to recommend that we go forward and do the design and bring a project forward.
Right, but we've spent over $700,000 beforehand. So if we negate this, if we repeal this project, we're $700,000 in the hole. However, and that's too bad, but that just because we've spent that doesn't mean we should go forward with something that doesn't seem like it's going to be in the best interest of the citizens. So we're just being cautious here, and it's going to be worth it to have the conversation next week, I do believe.
And so, councilors, what do you expect will happen on January 2nd at the meeting?
Well, what's going to happen is we're going to propose this, and then it will be voted on. So if they vote to support the repeal, then it goes to a second reading. And I have heard from council members who say they're interested. That since this came out last week, they've been hearing from constituents, and it's getting harder and harder to defend this project. So if it goes to a second reading the next week, then of course we would vote and see how it plays out. If 5 councilors vote to repeal, it passes, but then the mayor has the option to veto that. And then it comes back, we need 6 votes to override that. But I'm happy whether it passes or fails. To me, it's worth it to have this discussion for our citizens.
Are you doing any lobbying of your colleague? I mean, you need, it failed, you're past 6-1. You essentially need 6 votes in favor of your repeal effort to make it stay.
But you know who needs to do the lobbying of my colleagues is the citizens. You know, it comes down to doing the right thing. So am I going to be twisting their arm? No. Am I going to be presenting them with the information you're getting? Yes. And then it's called do the right thing.
Councilor Starr, you said something about the settlement agreement a little bit ago. What are you talking about?
Actually, there was a settlement and compliance agreement that was put out by the Department of Energy and Natural Resources. So I think I gave you a copy as part of the stack. So what they agreed to, they admitted no fault. I want to make sure that I'm very clear as part of the settlement agreement with the department. And then that's in the settlement agreement where it talks about them not having the financial wherewithal to pay the penalty.
Have you talked with those folks about how they were unable to pay a $20,000 fine but could not, and how they're supposed to be guarantors for the project was $30 million? Has anyone had that conversation with them that you know of?
Not to my knowledge.
And also, this just came together yesterday. I mean, we remember we're coming off our Christmas vacation. We're also coming off a contentious golf course management contract that happened last night. We were called back from our Christmas time off to vote to have an emergency meeting. So we got a lot of things happening, a lot of things in the hopper here. So this is just something that we thought was important. We needed to act now. So you're asking us if we've talked to people.
Can I catch on that question?
Okay.
Did you guys talk with Legacy and Holtgren about why they said they couldn't pay a fine, but they could guarantee a $30 million project?
Yes.
And how did that discussion go?
Well, when you look at these developments, they're set up as unique companies with unique sets of investors. And if you look at the DNR's findings, those were against Copper Lounge Partners, and they were against Holtgren Construction, 2 companies that the city is not doing business with. The individuals that are guarantors for this project did not have personal guarantees beyond what the corporate, the LLC, was responsible for. So it would be unlikely that you would find one company with a unique set of investors willing to pay the debt of another company.
But you'd have to admit, it seems suspicious to have interlocking companies like that with joint board members and so forth, whether they're LLCs or corporations. Doesn't that raise any red flags with the city?
Well, I don't think that when you look at this, one thing I'd suggest is if you have questions about the Copper Lounge Partners or Holtgren Construction, you contact them.
They're not talking because they're being sued.
Well, the city's doing business with Legacy.
And the city says you won't talk either. In fact, your city attorney has told you you can't comment about the whole situation. So who can you talk to?
I'm telling you that the city's doing business with Legacy Developments. As of today, that we've received $150,000 for the first payment as described in the development agreement.
If they put up a bond of some sort so they can deliver on if things go haywire?
We have a personal guarantee.
A personal guarantee, that's not, it's not a security agreement of any sort, is it?
Well, a personal guarantee allows us to pursue any one or a combination of the guarantors to deliver the project as described in the development agreements.
Did you do an asset search of them if they would be able to
if you had to sue them, they would have money to pay.
We've conducted our due diligence in terms of what their financial.
What's due diligence? What's due diligence in this thing? We don't even know what the guarantees are. You keep talking about the guarantors, but we've never even been told what they're guaranteeing and how they're guaranteeing, and I think that's what Todd's trying to get at.
The guarantee is part of the development agreement, and it spells out exactly what they're guaranteeing, that they will deliver this project as described in the agreements, the hotel and commercial space. And if they fail to do that, then we have the ability to go to them as individuals beyond their corporate, their LLC, to secure the assets necessary to deliver the project.
But if they're in jail, how are they gonna take care of the guarantee? You gonna put them back in jail or just move them to a different cell? I mean, that's what we're down to here.
The guarantee is joint and several, meaning that we can take the guarantee towards one or all of the guarantors. It doesn't matter for whatever reason why a guarantor may be incapacitated. We can go to one of them or all of them to pursue the city's.
Well, and again, I just think the public would feel more confident if all four of those people were just clean and clear. And yes,
It sounds a lot like the Sopranos episode that I referred to.
Just to be clear, Darren, so Hultgren Construction is no longer in business. Aaron Hultgren can be personally sued for this money that he is guaranteed for this project. And he has the funds to pay that, even though he could not pay a $20,000 fine.
What you're talking about is the difference between an individual and an LLC. And I think that would be best maybe addressed if you talk to Hultgren Construction or Copper Lounge Partners on their ability.
Won't answer our questions.
But if he declares bankruptcy, or all four of them declare bankruptcy, we're sitting there with a building that's worthless.
Is it honorable to engage in a transaction of this capacity with an organization that's actively hiring your broker? No disrespect, but this building went down across the street from my house. I watched it go down. I can't understand, as a person who loves his community, how individuals in my city can think that it's ethical to allow Aaron to be involved in any way, shape, or form. And I'm asking you as, our leaders, what part of you believes that it's ethical and honorable for Aaron to be involved, period? My thought was when this building went down, he would be responsible and respectful and step down and step away from construction. But the reality is, as a concerned resident, a taxpayer, someone who loves our community, I'm confused at how you folks can allow some blanket of another company to protect Aaron. He shouldn't be allowed to do this. It's not honorable, it's not ethical. And if you can explain to me how it's both honorable and ethical, I'll drop any concern that I have. But I can't find any reason as to why this is honorable or ethical to involve him. And it affects me emotionally as someone who loves my city. As someone who, watched the building goes down, knew everyone involved. And anybody watching this will know, I know everybody involved. And I'm asking you, how is there any integrity in it?
Look, we're confident that this project can be delivered to meet the requirements of our city and provide the parking needs that we have. We think Legacy Developments is the firm that will deliver that project to ensure that we have the parking into the future and the commercial space available to have more than just a parking ground.
How are we honoring Ethan in this?
That's a tragedy that I think none of us.
It's a negligence because of best practices not being implemented. Safety not being made the first priority. And in construction, safety is number one. If your men cannot enter the grounds and leave the grounds safely, there shouldn't be a project.
Yeah, we're very confident in our contractor, Journey Group, who has a tremendous safety record and is one of the most reputable firms in South Dakota, has over a century of history. And we know that they're going to deliver this project.
So Journey Group is building this?
Yes,
Legacy?
Journey Group is the contractor for this project. It never has been Hultgren Construction.
But he's involved. I think that's for a lot of us, sir, respectfully. That's the concerns that he's involved. I have nothing against him. He's a swell guy. I just can't see how it's ethical to involve him. I think the way we honor Ethan is moving forward in a direction that doesn't involve Aaron. Is there some fund set in place for Ethan's children? The loss of their father that's going to affect generations of his family? Is there anything there that's going to benefit Ethan? Are we doing anything to think about Ethan in this? Or how we benefit them? Because all I know right now is you guys want to put up a building and make money, and that's great. But we lost a valuable member of our community in an accident that shouldn't have happened. And that's where my concern lies.
To get back on track here, Mr. Ketchum, you explained just now that how the guarantors work and if one can't guarantee, you have 300 to go after. Is that something you can respond to the questions I've asked for the last 2 weeks? I'm looking for that explanation.
I think it's in your email inbox.
Okay. Okay, it wasn't when I got here, but, well, I appreciate hearing that. Is that something
I'd be glad to talk to you.
you'll again explain when this gets to first reading? or whatever? Okay, thanks.
Let's move to part two.
Part two.
Which is not as, shouldn't be as tough.
Yes, not as dramatic. And part two is that if you have, is Councilor Starr and I are bringing forth an ordinance on a separate note. You're going to get a 2-for-1 here today. And we're bringing forth an ordinance that is going to let the citizens vote on what threshold we should be using to elect our city council members. Historically, since we have our new form of government, it's been a 34% mandate. And Councilor Starr and I were both elected with 40-some%, as have many council persons in the past. There was a midnight move to change that to 51%. And what that's going to do, if that stands, is it's going to force council members into costly runoffs. $80,000 is what our city clerk said will be our next runoff. So we think it's an important issue that we're going to be putting that on the ballot or on the agenda for this next Tuesday as well. That the first reading will say that this is going to go on the ballot April 10th to let the citizens vote on what the threshold would be. We want to keep it as it has been, which elected Councilor Starr and I, is that if you get more than 34%, you're elected as the plurality method, or are we going to change it to a majority method, the 50+1, which is that's the threshold we use for the mayor's office. Remembering that the mayor is full-time, he's got the administration of all the employees, all the power in Sioux Falls, versus those of us that are part-time. So we're kind of excited to be bringing this forward.
I think the exciting part about it is if we're going to make a major change to our election laws, it should be done as a vote of the citizens of Sioux Falls as a way of doing it. Part of the research that we did is moving this forward was meeting with the Rapid City City Council, and one of the things they're trying to do is eliminate this type of proposal that they've already had in place. They've seen additional runoffs, additional costs, and the difference between the 40-some% and having an additional runoff creates a huge burden on the candidates. You run a successful campaign, but then you face a runoff election 3 weeks later. And it comes down to raising several $1,000s to get your word out. You run an additional campaign, the amount of time that it takes away from your family, and your full-time job that we do as part of the council, and we never complain about that. We spend a lot of time working as part of the council away from our full-time jobs, but the campaigns are too long. We hear it from citizens all the time that the campaigns are too long. And then adding an additional 3 weeks to the process for a possible runoff for a city council district or at-large race just is a huge burden to someone who's considering running for the council.
And we were both grassroots candidates. I mean, we ran on a very small budget and we worked very hard. But this kind of if you raise the threshold to 50+1%, you're going to be forcing people, it's going to force us to get out there and do more fundraising, and it really could eliminate just the common average citizen from getting involved. Let me also say that our school board, the county commission, legislature, all have that plurality method in place that we've been using in our city successfully. And even at the governor's race. So to make that threshold so high in our city, to me, didn't make sense. And so anyway, we're going to just let the citizens weigh in on it.
It will be, we'll ask that the council join us in adding it to the election on April 9th.
Yes.
Does that
April
take-
10th.
Tenth, sorry.
Does that take 6 votes to get it on the ballot?
I don't think so. I think it's just
I
fine.
believe it's a majority of the council, but I can check.
Yes.
And my guess, the second election would probably involve fewer people. It would cost more, and the actual number of people who would turn out would probably be less than the first one.
My friends from Rapid City that share that are on the council, and the reason they're trying to eliminate it from their governing documents to just go with a majority, with the minimum of in that 30%, like we've had 34%, has said that what they see is that you have 5 or 6 candidates run and you narrow it down to 2 for a runoff, and what happens is the people who supported the ones that are dropped out, the overall number actually ends up dropping for that runoff, the people that turn out. Because I may have come out to support Theresa, but I'm probably not, I don't care about the runoff as much. What we need to do is spend more time and effort in getting people involved in local elections and giving them reasons to be involved rather than worrying about trying to get another runoff election. In my race, I know there were about a little over 1,100 people out of 25,000 or almost 26,000 people in the district that actually voted. For me, it's a bigger problem of turnout, not by the majority that you win of those who do turn out. And keeping, again, it's about keeping the costs of elections down and shortening the amount of time that it takes. That you put everything that you've got into that general election, and then to try to extend another 3 weeks is a huge burden on candidates and people who are running for public office.
Well, and we're going to give the public a chance to say, hey, you know, we don't like the quality that Starr and I are doing, or that Dee Knutson's done in the past. I mean, there's been just an array of people elected with less than 51%. So we say to the citizens, have you been dissatisfied? Has there been a lack of integrity and representation from those people? And you're getting better quality from the people who get elected by 51%. You get to choose. So that's our democracy at work.
I think the vote, well, as Councilor Ralph think you introduced this change via an amendment, and then that amendment requires during a 4-4 vote of the council and the mayor tie.
Yes.
Do you think there's any of your colleagues who change their mind on this, or do you think they're more apt to let the public vote on it than reverse the course?
Mr. Joe Stehly, that's why we're bringing this forth. That's why in January 2nd, we're going to have a public discussion about it.
What do I have to do with it?
Well, no, I'm answering your question that, I mean, that, yeah, we don't really know. That's why.
I think we've heard some of the discussion. There was one councilor that did say to me that giving the citizens a chance to vote on it, that it might be something that they would consider. So I think we have that discussion. Again, it's another way of doing it. We did go to the Charter Revision, or Councilor Neitzer spent some time with the Charter Revision Commission, and they didn't feel that it should be part of the chart, which is, I think, also a valid point that will come up in the discussion as well. So,
But if it is in the charter, then it's firmly placed there. It's not something.
election law should be in the charter as far as I'm concerned.
Would you send to the ballot if the council approves, would that be an ordinance that they would, the public would be voting on, or would that be a charter?
It's good to be, I think it's a charter, yes. But we're proposing it as an ordinance.
Right, it takes an ordinance to put it on the ballot as a charter amendment, but it is a charter, in the charter amendment.
It would be enshrined in charter.
Yes.
Correct. And then if there were changes that needed to be made, then it would have to go back to, you know, changing things in an amendment process that was part of a ordinance change that was a cleanup to match state law and to make our election laws. To do it in an amendment form is a difficult, to me, isn't a fair way of doing it. There wasn't a lot of notice and people didn't get a chance. I know on one of the local call-in shows had a chance to talk about it. People were like, well, when can we come down and complain about this or be part and weigh in and disagree? And it was already over.
There was nothing, yes, that's the other thing, there was no notification. And we saw last night with this golf course thing, I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, but the Carnegie was packed. People coming in to give their input. Week 2 was packed. Well, you know what we heard them say last night is, we didn't get a chance to weigh in on this on the front end. And that's something in our community that we need to be, take notice of. That too many times things are passed, the public finds out after the fact. This vote thing we're talking about, exactly this is what happened. So dialogue, hearing from the public is all good. Whether you agree with us or not, we want to get that moving more fluidly within the city, the growing city of Sioux Falls.
Is there additional cost to taxpayers associated with the runoff election?
$80,000. And I asked our city clerk that, I think a week ago, he was doing the presentation, and I said, how much is it? $80,000.
Isn't your real beef with the former government that we have a strong mayor government here? Isn't that what this is really about? Things you're talking about, I mean,
Todd, that's a whole nother show.
Well,
I think-
seriously.
Well,
Well, I think there is a concern about what the role of government is. We've spent a lot of time talking about whether it's funding nonprofits or not funding nonprofits. It's involving two branches of government, whether it's an executive branch and a legislative branch. So you're partially correct in saying that the council's flexing its muscles a little bit and getting a chance to say, we need to be involved in the process. I felt that way last night. If you watched my comments about what was wrong with the RFP process, it wasn't the RFP, it was not having any public input before we developed a scope of work and went out to the RFP process. The people who were involved in the RFP process followed the criteria that was set out for them by the administration, who didn't open it up. We spent a lot of time last night talking about how did we get here? How did we get 100 people plus and an overflow room that was full? Because we didn't talk to people before we went out for RFPs. What do we want in a golf facility? What do we want in a parking ramp? We didn't have public meetings beforehand. We didn't meet with constituents. We had one opportunity at second reading for people to weigh in on the final plan, and we pushed it through in less than 2 weeks. That goes back to our original thing. People didn't get the opportunity to be involved. And then we can't figure out why people are upset. People want to hear from their local government. They want the ability to say, you may not agree with me, but I have the opportunity to be heard. By having 2 meetings with the golf proposal last night and the management agreement, people felt like when they left last night that they were heard. They weren't necessarily agreed with their position, but they had the ability to address the council twice. We need to hold more meetings. It's the first thing we do when someone comes in for a zoning change, is we say to them, did you meet with the neighbors? Did you meet with the constituents? Did you do this part of it? And then we don't do that as a city government. We don't hold open houses on certain issues, and we try to get them done at the last minute in the spirit of getting things done, or doing things more like business. We do it behind closed doors in a boardroom, and you make a corporate decision and you move on. We're dealing with the taxpayers' money, and it's important that we get a chance to hear and they buy into it. Mayor Allander said, was quoted in the story about their new event center they're talking about. He's going to hold meetings until people are tired of coming to the project, or until they're tired of coming to the meetings. And he's going to continue to hold meetings and try to convince people that it's a good idea before they bring it to the council. They get to talk to the council and they get to do it. So you're probably pretty close to being right that this is a chance to separate an executive branch policy decision that the charter was formed to do from an administrative process.
well, and if I may, Todd, your question about the form of government, I will say that having been a citizen advocate, watchdog for the last 11 years, I have observed our council silently going along with everything. There's no dialogue, there's been no debate, there's been no negotiation. And so we're trying to do that. We're listening, we're saying, it doesn't seem quite right, we're standing up, we're willing to stand alone, we're willing to vote no. And I think people want that. They want us to ask questions, and so we are kind of pushing the parameters of what can a city council do. And according to charter, there's a lot that we can do, but it just has never been utilized before. So I think we need to keep thinking with all of our citizenry, what do you want for representation? How do you want us to engage with you? And having people come in and give public input and hearing from people is just so fabulous. And if you came to those golf course meetings last night and the week before, it was powerful to hear from people. We hear from the administration all the time. Case in point, the ramp. We had Derek Ketchum and Matt Nelson before us many, many times telling us over and over what's happening, this is happening, this is happening. Why can't we let the citizens come and tell us over and over what they are interested in and their concerns? I think it's two need to be leveled out. So we're getting a sense of both sides.
I think the annexation, I'm sorry, but I think the annexation task force was a perfect example of what, how city government should be done. There was a misconception, I think, at the beginning of what we were going to forcibly annex and move forward. But we held meetings, we added more meetings. We took the time to listen to the public. We even listened to people who didn't even live in the city limits that are possibly affected by this in the future. So by listening, when it finally did come to the council and the report was made to us, people were a lot calmer. They understood what we were trying to accomplish. They have some ground rules. We can do some pre-annexation agreements, but we also gave staff direction of where they can go with the pre-annexation agreements and the annexations moving forward, what we would support as policy from the council. And that all started because the planning department brought it to the council and we voted down several of their recommendations. And we said, no, let's wait and let's have an orderly process of how we solve this. And let's hear from the citizens, give them that opportunity to be heard. Sorry.
No, you're okay. This is about plurality majority. I mean,
Correct.
when it comes to golf and annexation, all those things, people have a tie to it, and that's what gets them excited. I mean, we're talking about election thresholds. I mean, have you heard from the public that they have a desire to weigh in on this?
I've heard from a ton of people that have been, the difference in the change that it will do. And yes, charter amendments, most people, when it comes to governance, whether it's a nonprofit or your church or whatever organization, it's the last committee that anybody ever does. But at the same time, this affects the quality and the likelihood of people being able to join the race. If you have to plan to run for city council and you have to have in the back of your mind that you're gonna, do I spend all the few resources that I get my neighbor to give me $10 or $20 that most of my campaign was based on, and then I'm gonna have to go back and ask them for another support to raise that within that runoff period of time, we're now extending the length. So yes, I think there are a lot of people who are interested, because there are a lot of people who would like to serve on the council until they get a real look at what it takes. And one of the things that we heard in the Charter Revision Committee from the drafters or the founders, whatever we want to call them, was that we want to keep it as simple as possible for people to serve on the council. They use that it doesn't take away from your full-time job. It doesn't take away from your full-time job, does it? It does mine all the
Yeah,
time by the
absolutely.
time we're done,
Well, and we also, in our city, we didn't have a chance to really discuss this because it happened like that, it was done. So that the media didn't really even have a chance to get a bite of this thing as it was playing out. So I will do everything I can to alert the citizens that this is coming up if we get it on the ballot. But also, let's think about this in our community. Do we want this to become a situation where the only way you can run is if you are connected to big money? You're getting huge donations from developers and the big players in our community. Are those the people, is that all we want to be able to be elected? You have to have X amount, $50,000 to run. I raised $8,000, what, he raised about $200.
okay. No, I've raised a little over seven. Between 7 and 8.
Small amounts, and so we were able to be elected. We want to keep this a reasonable proposal for anybody who wants to jump in. So, whoever asked the question, I think it will resonate with the public.
I think it'll add to the mayoral discussions as well. It always does. When the charter amendments that get included in a mayoral election year are affected by the charter amendments. I think there's a big part of what we do that the charter revision things that come up become some of the talking points of the campaign. Mostly because people don't understand a lot of them too. I mean, it's the amendments that we put on statewide ballots, people have a hard time. But then the candidates get a chance to discuss them, and it's issues that add to the conversation.
Well, if this ends up on the ballot, will you guys be able to publicly lobby for it, or I know the city can't take a position on an election issue?
We can sure provide an education that tells both sides of the story. I know that's part of the, why there's advantage. There are advantages. I know the proponents of making this change have made a pretty good case too, like most things that they felt like they should be represented by a majority of the people who vote. I just happen to disagree with that and say that adds that part of it. So I think there'll be a lot of educational discussion that happens as part of the adding it to the ballot. I think the mayoral candidates will have a chance to talk about it. I think that'll add to some of their debate time and questions if it's on the ballot.
4 years ago in the election, the city had 8 vocational education sessions where they pushed for the 4 ballot issues the way they wanted them put on the ballot. So if there is a problem with the city coming down and saying that you can't be involved in this process, we have a precedent that is already established by the mayor of Sioux Falls that actually he used city resources to run for re-election, and he used those 4 ballot issues to his advantage for his election. So you should be able to do the same.
We go back to the building for just a minute.
Certainly.
Is there a hold harmless agreement that says that the guarantors of this project will hold the city of Sioux Falls, et cetera, harmless in the event that a number of bad things happen?
I think the contract is very well crafted and developed to cover those issues. But it still goes back to, for me, the financial aspect of the personal guarantees that we were put in place. When we originally voted on this, the assurance we were given is that these 4 individuals have the wherewithal to do that. And then when they choose one of their LLCs or the companies that they're a part of, the settlement agreement was signed personally by Mr. Holgren and Mr. Gray. So if they're saying that they convinced them that they didn't have the resources to pay a fine because of one company, it's the personal guarantee that goes with that. And that's where my concern is at, and that's why I decided to co-sponsor with Councilor Stehly.
Well, thank you for coming. Thank you. God bless. Have a great day.
Y'all come back now. Here.
Security, escort this gentleman out, please.
Come on, Soda Pop, let's go.